All right, so India's capital, New Delhi, is hosting the crucial meeting of the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting. The two-day summit, of course, begins later today, and ministers have started arriving in New Delhi. Remember, this meeting is, of course, taking place under the shadow of war and also the spiraling US-China tensions. But all eyes are, of course, going to be on New Delhi and what role India can play as the chair of G20 in getting a joint communique passed. Now, a day before the official meeting, the British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly had in fact spoken to WION. And this is what he had to say about the meeting.
Really strong relationship between India and the UK. Well, so today I'm looking forward to the G20, where we're going to be obviously talking about the really strong relationship between India and the UK, but also the work we can do together to address the global challenges, climate change, sustainable development, these kind of things.
Meanwhile, the EU's Vice President Joseph Borrell remained pretty tight-lipped about the meeting.
Comes to resolving the ongoing conflict in Russia and Ukraine, sir. Any comments, sir? Sir,
we'll see tomorrow. I cannot tell you.
Meanwhile, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov met with his Indian counterpart S. Jaishankar in New Delhi. Lavrov will, of course, be attending the G20 meeting and also the Raisina dialogue. Now, earlier in the day, the Russian Foreign Ministry released a statement that read, and I quote him here, "We support India's G20 presidency in its commitment to promote a unifying agenda that will restore confidence in multilateral diplomacy and also prevent the fragmentation of the global economy." Now, earlier in the day, India's Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Kwatra held a press briefing before the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting while answering a question posed by WION on India's plan to bridge the gap between the West and Russia and whether a joint communique will be issued at the end of the summit. Kwatra said that at this point of time it is difficult to predict the outcome of the Foreign Ministers meeting. Listen in to what he had to say.
The issues that we face on the reform of multilateralism, each one of them is a very, very significant and a substantial issue which is absolutely crucial for the global South. I have no reason to doubt that each of these agenda items will receive its due focus when the foreign ministers meet tomorrow and hold their discussions. It is not for me to prejudge the outcome of those discussions.
Now remember, the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting is being held just days after a meet of the finance ministers of the bloc in Bengaluru, where the leaders had failed to reach a consensus and the meeting ended without a joint communique after China and Russia had declined to sign a joint statement condemning Moscow for its war in Ukraine. Now, India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar also held talks with Britain's Foreign Minister. James Cleverly, the Indian Foreign Minister, said that the two leaders held discussions on the global situation as well as the G20 agenda. S. Jaishankar also announced the arrival of Turkey's Foreign Minister to India as well. Both the ministers discussed bilateral relations on the sidelines of the G20 meeting. Taking to Twitter, the Turkish Foreign Minister said that he had met with India's External Affairs Minister and had thanked him for Operation Dost, which of course is the search and rescue operation initiated by the Indian government to help the earthquake-hit Turkey and Syria. The Jaishankar also held bilateral talks with his Brazilian counterpart and discussed issues that will be tabled at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is expected to happen at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting, we're being joined in by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, who is joining us live on this broadcast. He's joining us live from New Delhi. Siddhant, bring us up to speed as to what is likely to unfold when the foreign ministers of the G20 nations, of course, come together in New Delhi.
Well, Mohammed, Delhi is all decked up to welcome the G20 foreign ministers, many of whom have arrived in the Indian national capital. And of course, Delhi has been decked up. You can see posters behind me of G20 Foreign Ministers meeting. But essentially, the day starts when the dinner happens in about 2 hours' time. While there will be the presence of the Russian Foreign Minister, many Western Foreign Ministers are going to land in Delhi only after that. But essentially, tomorrow will be the D-Day when Foreign Ministers of all the countries, the 20 most powerful economies, meet here in Delhi and discuss global issues, whether it's the reform of the United Nations Security Council or whether it's the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Something that will be dominating the agenda. We saw earlier today the Indian Foreign Secretary held a press briefing in which many of the questions were on that topic as to how India will bridge the divide between West and Russia, something that will be closely watched, because we saw after the finance ministers meeting in Bangalore, there was no joint statement, but of course India issued a shared statement and outcome document. So will that be something that is going to happen here as well? We will get to know by tomorrow evening this time.
Now, what is interesting is that Anthony Blinken and also Sergey Lavrov will be taking part in this G20 Foreign Ministers meeting. Do you think that the two leaders would, of course, wish to perhaps, try find common ground on the many differences that they have, especially the war in Ukraine?
Well, it is unlikely to happen. It's very, very unlikely that both the foreign ministers, the American or the Russian foreign minister, having a meeting or even look at each other is something that's going to make headlines. But essentially, both the foreign ministers are expected to hold their separate press briefings in which we could see some kind of their own version of the ongoing conflict. But essentially, New Delhi will be playing host to the powerful economies, and how India manages to bring the ties together is something that will be closely watched. But also how India manages to put on the table the issues of the global south emerging out of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine is something that India has been talking about. We saw in the month of January, India hosted the summit for Global South, and that summit, the outcomes of that summit does feeds into this foreign ministers meeting that will see its key day on Thursday.
Absolutely indeed, Siddhant. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and getting us all those insights there. We'll of course come back to you as more details emerge as the summit of course unfolds in New Delhi there. And we also earlier spoke with Mr. Andreas Umland. He joined us live from Berlin. He is an analyst at the Stockholm Centre for East European Studies at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Now, this is what he had to say about many points of divergences that exist between Russia and the United States, especially concerning what is happening in Ukraine, and as to whether these differences can in fact be ironed out at the Foreign Ministers meeting in New Delhi as part of the G20 Foreign Ministers meet. Listen in to what Andreas Umland had to say.
That's difficult to say because Russia has influence, especially in the global south, although the paradox situation here is that the situation in which Ukraine is in is more similar to many countries in the global south. The global north is a well-structured realm with lots of security guarantees, nuclear superpowers basically protecting themselves and others. And Ukraine is just an exception in the global north. In the global south, I think the current situation of Ukraine, which does not have nuclear weapons, which is not protected by a large alliance or a nuclear superpower, is very similar to many countries in the global south. Also, Ukraine is a post-colonial country. It was a former colony of the Tsarist and the Soviet empires. And in spite of that situation of Ukraine, it does not receive the kind of support that one would expect. On the contrary, Russia has a lot of influence, and that's why I am skeptical whether the G20 will really come with a good statement out of this.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.